look, I enjoyed everything there was to enjoy about growing up on television, but there was a responsibility because I had a head on my shoulders, and I was around other people who had head on their shoulders. So that access didn't really come down my path because I wasn't around.
It all began with a headline that stopped everyone cold. Malcolm-Jamal Warner, gone, just 54 years old, swept away by the waves off Costa Rica's Caribbean coast. The story was wrapped up in that tragic, clean bow they love to hand the public. Accidental drowning, they called it. A dream vacation turned nightmare in mere minutes. They painted the picture: a sudden current, frantic bystanders pulling him from the water, paramedics fighting for his life for 20 minutes before giving up. But the more people looked at the details, the less the story made sense. Warner wasn't some fragile man. He was a strong swimmer, a man who cared about his health, stayed fit, and was smack in the middle of a busy, fulfilled life. Work, family, fatherhood, everything was moving. And yet we're supposed to believe a tide just dragged him under? That a man like him could vanish so fast even with a rescuer right there who somehow survives? Oh no, people weren't buying it. This wasn't just another tragedy. This was a mystery.
The incident took place on Sunday in Costa Rica. He was on a family vacation. He was swimming off of the coast of a town called Cocles in the province of Limon. He was swimming at Playa Grande. I mean, I've visited Costa Rica a few times. I was there with my family a few years ago, and those...
Malcolm-Jamal Warner was never just another Hollywood face. For millions, he was Theo Huxtable, the witty, sometimes stubborn, but always lovable son who helped redefine what black families looked like on primetime TV. But off-screen, he was different. No scandals, no endless drama. He built a whole second career in music, directed, mentored, and even brought people together with his podcast. That spotless record made his sudden death even harder to accept. And in the places mainstream media never dares to look, the whispers began instantly. Some said he had been talking too freely, that he was stepping into circles that did not appreciate his candor. And maybe, just maybe, he'd been marked. And who was at the center of fanning those suspicions? Jaguar Wright. Yes, that Jaguar Wright. A woman who has made it her mission to expose what she calls the industry's shadow network. A dark tangle of powerful names, secretive rituals, and ruthless silencing of those who dare to speak. And what did she say? Oh, she dropped bombs. According to Wright, Warner had been preparing to expose explosive information about high-ranking entertainment figures, secrets that could shake both the music world and television. She said he told close friends he felt watched in the weeks before his Costa Rica trip, that people were way too interested in his travel plans. To her, the drowning wasn't an accident. It was way too convenient. Just another accident in a long string of accidents that always seemed to remove outspoken artists. Wright called it a whistleblower purge, and she dared everyone to connect the dots.
And I'm not saying allegedly.
Oh.
I'm saying, Sean Carter, you're a piece of shit. Taking Pimp C wasn't bad enough. You just want to go down there and you want to just remove all of the balls from every real gangster.
And let's be honest, some details never added up. If Warner had immediate bystander help, why did the rescue fail so badly? Why was the man who supposedly tried to save him, someone with zero personal connection, first listed in critical condition, only to walk out of the hospital fine, no long-term harm? Authorities say a current dragged Warner under, but locals familiar with that very beach said, hold on. Yes, the sea was rough, but not impossible. And the story? Oh, the story kept changing. First, it was just a general drowning. Then suddenly it became asphyxiation by submersion. That cold, clinical language meant to smooth over the cracks and shut down the deeper questions.
Why does it all come to a head now? Why now? Why?
Because he's the acceptable monster at this time. Like R. Kelly was the last time I sat on this couch.
So who's next?
Y'all don't see the lineup?
That's when Jaguar Wright's claims turned razor sharp. She painted Warner as a man holding dangerous knowledge, explosive files stored in his head, maybe even in his possession, files about underground dealings most people dismiss as urban legends. We're talking trafficking pipelines, shady financial back channels, and those unspoken pacts that keep certain Hollywood names untouchable. And she wasn't shy about naming names. P. Diddy, whom she mockingly calls Shaw Diddy, Jay-Z, Beyonce, titans of the industry, people with enough money and influence to make inconvenient voices disappear. She swore Warner knew too much, and that's why he had to be silenced. No physical documents have surfaced to back her up, of course. But let's not pretend people weren't listening. With P. Diddy himself already fighting messy, high-stakes legal battles, Wright's words landed on ears that were hungry to believe.
I want you to think about this. Allegedly, Sean Carter is responsible for enacting Hype Williams to put Aaliyah on a faulty plane to move her out the way as punishment for rejecting him, and so he could level up Beyonce, who was
And Wright didn't stop with Warner. She pulled us straight back into the early 2000s. Another tragedy, another accident. The plane crash that killed Aaliyah at just 22. The official story reads like a tragic checklist. An overloaded aircraft, a pilot without the right credentials, banned substances in his system, and a plane that nosedived just seconds after takeoff in the Bahamas. But according to Wright, that wasn't the whole story, not even close. She insists Aaliyah's end mirrored Warner's. A removal, carefully staged, designed to look like an accident. A setup that conveniently cleared the path for those who stood to gain. And here's the kicker. Why Aaliyah? Jaguar Wright points to one name, Beyonce. At the time, both women were R&B darlings. Both had stepped into acting. Both were on the verge of long, glittering careers. But the industry, Wright claims, only had room for one queen, and Beyonce was the chosen one. Why? Wright hints at ties to secret societies, shadow alliances, and an entertainment industry that guards its favorites with ruthless precision. She claims Aaliyah either refused to play along or threatened to pull back the curtain, and so the crash happened. Aaliyah gone, Beyonce ascendant, and those same powerful forces? Wright insists they are still guarding the real story. Just like she says Warner's death is being buried under medical reports and neat tourist-friendly explanations. Of course, conspiracy theories always thrive in the gaps where facts fall short. But look at the details. The Bahamas crash investigation. The plane was 700 pounds overweight. Cargo was mysteriously misdirected. Last-minute changes to the charter company. A pilot with a shady record, probation kept quiet from aviation officials, and a license acquired under suspicious circumstances. To the officials, it sounded like negligence. To Wright and her followers, it sounded like a script. A rehearsed play. The same kind of setup she sees in Warner's Drowning. And here's where it gets eerie. Both Aaliyah and Warner reportedly felt a heavy unease before their trips. Aaliyah voiced her fears. She didn't want to board that small plane. Warner? According to friends, he confided that he felt watched. A strange, suffocating pressure in the weeks leading up to Costa Rica. Eyes on him, always watching. There's no paper trail, of course, nothing official, just whispered accounts from those close to them. But isn't that always how these stories go? The kind of warnings that feel like smoke signals after the fire has already burned through. Enough to haunt the imagination, but never enough to nail down in court. Exactly the kind of details that feed speculation and keep the conspiracies alive. And let's be honest, the atmosphere around Warner's death was ripe for this kind of talk. His legacy was clean. No messy scandals, no easy excuses to chalk it up to reckless behavior. So when someone like that is suddenly gone, and the reason is something as ordinary as a tide on a sunny tourist beach, people refuse to just nod and move on. Then add Jaguar Wright into the mix, a woman with a gift for linking today's mysteries to yesterday's unsolved tragedies. Suddenly, Warner's name doesn't just sit in the obituaries. It sits in the middle of a firestorm of whispers and late-night debates. And when you add the long list of stars who supposedly died too soon right before speaking out, the theories practically write themselves. The officials closed their books. They called it accidental asphyxiation by submersion. Case closed. But online? Oh, the conversation had only just begun. Comment threads lit up, live stream rants exploded, private group chats buzzed with theories, and suddenly Warner's name sat right beside Aaliyah, Michael Jackson, Left Eye, and others. Stars whose sudden exits still haunt, and whose real stories in some circles will never be considered closed. And then Jaguar Wright's voice sharpened. Every time she spoke of Aaliyah, the parallels she drew with Warner sent chills down spines. Both loved by millions, both uneasy before their trips, both victims of sudden last-minute changes to their travel, both taken in what the official reports called accidents. But Wright insists these weren't coincidences. No, she calls them signatures, industry signatures, Hollywood's playbook, a way of removing a voice without the mess of scandal, accidents that look tragic but convenient, a method so clean it leaves little for investigators to chase, just technical errors and bad luck. And Warner's case? She says it reeks of that same script. A strong swimmer swallowed by a current, a bystander rescuer who lives, a neat, tidy conclusion with no foul play mentioned, just another sealed file in the drawer. But Wright? She refuses to let it be forgotten. She swears Warner's podcast, Not All Hood, was pulling far too much attention to uncomfortable truths. In that space, Warner was brave. He tackled exploitation, image control, and how the industry pushes certain figures forward while boxing others out. He broke down the myth of one monolithic Black experience, and he did it with charisma, clarity, and an audience that listened. To conspiracy watchers, that kind of voice, that fearless candor, was a ticking time bomb, and the closer Warner got to naming the architects of exploitation, the more dangerous he became. In fact, fact, just weeks before his trip to Costa Rica, Warner recorded an unusually heavy episode of Not All Hood. At the time, many brushed it off as another deep dive. But in hindsight, the tone feels chilling. He spoke of storms that arrive unannounced, tides that drag people far from shore, invisible architects who decide which voices get amplified and which get erased. The imagery was haunting, almost prophetic, and while he never named names, the themes were crystal clear. Warner had seen the machinery, and he was willing to talk about it, even if only in coded metaphors. Now fans replay that episode like it's a treasure map. They point to pauses in his delivery, moments where it felt like he was deciding just how much he could say before crossing a dangerous line. Phrases like messages carved in plain sight and truths that cannot be spoken without consequence. The episode's title itself, cryptic and abstract, has been dissected endlessly. Some say it symbolized a forced ending, a career or even a life cut short before its true strength could break through. And now, with his death, that podcast feels less like entertainment and more like evidence. A roadmap of warnings, a desperate attempt to document the danger without inviting it directly. For some listeners, it plays like Warner's coded farewell. For others, it's a test, a challenge to see who would read between the lines and carry his mission forward if he couldn't. Intentional or not, it's become a centerpiece of speculation. Proof, in the eyes of many, that Warner knew he was in danger. Wright insists Warner wasn't just Theo Huxtable frozen in reruns. He was a truth teller, unafraid to peel back the curtain on the very system that built him. And she believes that made him a target. Her theory runs like this. There are names and institutions that will stop at nothing to protect their empires. And when someone dares to hint too loudly at the shadows behind the curtain, their image turns from asset to liability. And once that happens, the playbook unfolds. A freak accident, a sudden tragedy, a narrative of negligence or bad luck. And just like that, a voice is gone, forever. She draws the line straight through history. Aaliyah's ignored fears before boarding, Warner's subtle comments about being watched, both silenced, both leaving behind legacies tangled in suspicion. And in both cases, the same cluster of powerful figures, icons, moguls, executives, hover in the background. The very names Wright has been calling out for years. She swears there's a culture of fear. Careers, reputations, even lives are the currency used to enforce silence. And when someone refuses to fall in line, the accident is waiting. It's a bleak lens to view the world through, but Wright keeps hammering it home. The pattern stretches across decades. Aaliyah in 2001, Left Eye in 2002, Michael Jackson in 2009, and now Warner in 2025. The pattern, she says, is undeniable, if only people are willing to connect the dots. And Wright leaves us with both a promise and a warning. She says more names will come out if enough people pay attention. So now the question lingers like a storm cloud. If Malcolm-Jamal Warner and Aaliyah were silenced, who might be next, and what truths are powerful people still desperate to bury? Stay sharp, stay curious, and until the shadows give up their secrets, don't believe the bow they try to tie around tragedy.